The emergency beacon had been broadcasting for 2 standard days before the Galactic Veterinary Corps finally intercepted it. A red-level signal: organism in distress, aggressive behavior, potentially contagious. The coordinates led to a drifting Terran cargo vessel named Prospector's Gamble, now silent, its crew unresponsive. The distress alert contained garbled audio, but one phrase repeated clearly: containment breach. Specimen loose. Not safe. On board the GVC intervention craft Hekatar, Chief Xenovet Jarnox triple-checked the containment modules and tranquilizer arrays. He was seasoned, having treated everything from a molten lunch Tharvian sludge beast to a neurotoxic dream eel. But this mission had a different weight. The Terran logs described the specimen only as quadruped, small, deceptive. Jarnox didn't like vague descriptors, especially from humans. Their records are full of emotional bias, muttered Jarnox as he reviewed the footage again. The last clear image showed a Terran in a tattered uniform, blood smeared down his cheek as he shouted into the camera. Don't underestimate it. It's not what it looks like. Then static. Jarnox's assistant, a pale green Therian named Pelex, floated into the bay, his 3 eyes blinking out of sync. We've arrived. No signs of external damage. Life signs are minimal. 1, perhaps 2, still active, could be human. The rest, likely expired. Prep the tranquilizers. Calibrate for a Class 4 evasive predator. And bring the dampeners. Pelex hesitated. You think it's really that bad? Jarnox's voice was steady. I think humans don't panic easily. If one of them sent that message, then yes, it's that bad. They docked with a hiss and magnetic clank. The boarding hatch opened onto a dim corridor lined with flickering lights. The air was stale, heavy with oxidized metal, and something faintly organic. Switch to respirator mode, Jarnox said, adjusting his helm. Keep your translator live. If any survivors are here, we need to keep them conscious. As they stepped into the Prospector's Gamble, Pelex swept the room with his scanner, reading one life form. Human. Forward medbay. Let's move. The corridor was littered with overturned crates and scorched panels. At one junction, claw marks gouged the walls, long, deep, and erratic. Jarnox knelt, inspecting them. Too shallow for a branker. Too wide for a scythewhelp. But definitely aggressive. Pelex floated nervously behind him, weapon module trembling. They reached the medbay. The door was scorched shut. Jarnox activated his plasma cutter and sliced through the lock, then pushed the door open. Inside, on the floor, lay a man in a torn pressure suit. He was barely conscious, his left arm bent at an unnatural angle and his face pale from blood loss. Nearby, an overturned medical cart had spilled its contents. Jarnox knelt beside him. Pelex, stabilizer. Now. The man stirred, eyes fluttering open. Where is it? Jarnox asked. Contained. The man rasped. Don't touch it. Where is the creature? The man's gaze flicked to the far corner of the room. Jarnox followed it. Sitting atop a small pile of thermal blankets was a creature no more than half a meter long. It had fur, paws, a tail that flicked lazily. It looked up at them with wide green eyes and made a sound. PRRT. Jarnox blinked. Pelex let out a sharp, confused chirp. That's the thing. The man coughed violently. Don't let it fool you. Jarnox turned back to face the man. You're injured. We'll transfer you to the Hekatar. But I need to know, what does it do? The man tried to sit up, but failed. It's manipulative. It acts harmless. Then, it gets into your head, makes you do things. I saw Taylor walk into an exhaust vent. Smiling. Didn't even scream. Jarnox looked back at the animal. It licked its paw. Pelex, he said slowly, scan it. Pelex floated forward, scanner humming. Life form mammalian. Brain activity. Elevated. No toxins. No parasitic signatures. But there's unfamiliar neurochemical discharge patterns. Highly suggestive of emotional manipulation. The creature stood and padded toward them. It brushed against Pelex's leg. Pelex let out a squeak. It just touched me. I think I like it. Jarnox stepped forward and raised his tranquilizer. The creature looked up at him. It purred. He hesitated. The man on the floor groaned. You feel it, don't you? That weird warmth? That's how it starts. Pelex scratched his own head. I want to hug it. Do not hug it, the man shouted, then clutched his side in pain. Jarnox lowered the tranquilizer slightly. We'll need to isolate it. Contain it under full sensory dampening. No visual contact. No auditory stimuli. Possibly even olfactory filters. It doesn't matter, the man said. It got to us even through the cameras. We tried blindfolding ourselves. Didn't help. Jarnox gestured for Pelex to release the restraining sphere. A shimmering field enveloped the feline, lifting it gently into the air. It didn't resist. It floated, idly swiping at the containment barrier with one paw, then let out another melodic purr. Back aboard the Hecatar, Jarnox oversaw the man's medical treatment. His name was Isin Corwin, engineer and second officer of the Prospector's Gamble. He had a broken humerus, 2 fractured ribs, and moderate blood loss. The med team stabilized him, but warned that his recovery would take weeks, possibly longer due to nerve involvement in the arm. Isin woke again 2 hours later, groggy but alert. Jarnox stood at the foot of his cot. You were lucky to survive, Jarnox said. Isin gave a dry laugh that turned into a cough. Depends on your definition of lucky. We've contained the creature. It's in a sealed chamber. No visual or audio link. My team is running neuronetic scans. Isin's eyes widened. That won't help. It's not about the signals. It's presence. That thing projects. Comfort. Safety. You start forgetting what fear feels like. Then you start trusting it. Pelex entered holding a data pad. Preliminary results are in. The creature's presence triggers a release of oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, and even reduces cortisol levels in the brain. It literally induces a state of calm euphoria. Jarnox frowned. That doesn't make it dangerous. Unless you're in space, Isin said. Or a lab. Or mid-docking. It made us ignore alarms. Missed a hull breach because Mara was too busy petting it. We lost cabin pressure in Section 3. No one even reacted. Jarnox paced the room. It's not aggressive. It's psychologically invasive. A passive manipulator. Exactly, Isin said. It purrs. We obey. Later that cycle, Jarnox visited the containment chamber. The animal sat in the center on a synthetic cushion, tail curled around its paws. It stared at him through the tinted glass. No sound came through. No smell. But still, he felt a tug. An urge to open the door. He took a step back. Pelex stood beside him. We can't release it. Not onto a station. Not anywhere populated. I agree, Jarnox said. But we also can't destroy it. Not without understanding how it works. We found its file in the cargo manifest, Pelex added. Terrans call it a cat. Native to Earth. There were millions of them. Jarnox turned sharply. Millions. Yes. Domesticated. Kept as companions. Jarnox stared at the creature again, the implications unraveling like a slow horror. They lived with this. Pelex nodded. In their homes. On their laps. Sometimes on their heads. Jarnox shook his head. This explains a lot about Terrans. Inside the chamber, the feline lay down, stretched, and closed its eyes. Jarnox sighed. We'll need to study it further. Carefully. With full countermeasures. Pelex was already typing on his pad. I'll request a level 7 containment suite. And a psychologist. Jarnox nodded grimly. And someone to explain how a species that cuddles with emotional parasites managed to invent faster than light travel. In the med bay, Isin lay back against the cot, his arm immobilized in a brace. He stared at the ceiling. Heard you're keeping it, he muttered to the nurse. The nurse, an insectoid from the Surik belt, clicked her mandibles nervously. Yes. For study. Isin chuckled darkly. Just don't let it purr. That's where the real danger is. 2 days after containment, the feline had stopped eating. It sat curled in the corner of its isolation pod, silent and motionless except for the occasional twitch of its ear. The nutrient paste had gone untouched. Even the warmed protein cubes synthesized after extensive analysis of Terran food logs had failed to tempt it. Jarnox stood outside the observation chamber, arms folded, antennae twitching in quiet frustration. The feline's vitals remained steady, but activity levels had plummeted. It's not reacting to any of the stimuli, Pelex said, reviewing the latest monitor output. Visual, auditory, olfactory, nothing. It's ignoring everything. Withdrawal behavior, Jarnox muttered. Possibly a response to isolation. It's not an apex predator, but it's behaving like one. Denying sustenance until conditions improve. Jarnox turned toward the console. Play the recording from the Terran quarters again. The one with the grooming behavior. Pelex hesitated, then tapped the panel. A silent image played across the screen. The feline nestled in Officer Mara's lap, kneading rhythmically at her chest with its paws while she scratched its head. Her expression looked vacant, blissful. Jarnox tilted his head. It seeks contact, not just space proximity physical interaction. That's dangerous, Pelex said. Exposure leads to compromised cognition. Agreed, Jarnox replied. But it's dying, and we can't study a corpse. They stood in silence for several seconds. Then Jarnox keyed the intercom. Bring in the drone. The care drone entered the chamber moments later, a floating orb with a simple manipulator arm and padded extension. It drifted toward the feline, paused, and gently patted its side. The feline opened one eye. Then, slowly, languidly, it rose to its feet and rubbed its head against the drone's extension. Pelex watched the monitor, his mouth slightly agape. It made contact. The feline walked in a circle, then curled around the drone's base, purring so forcefully its flanks visibly vibrated. Its vitals just spiked, Pelex said. In a good way. Neural activity's stabilizing. Heart rate's up to normal. It's Jarnox. It's recovering. Jarnox didn't respond immediately. He stared at the screen, watching the creature's tail flick gently with each breath. No intelligence we've cataloged before has responded like this to artificial contact, he said finally. It should recognize the drone as non-living. Unless it doesn't care, Pelex offered. Maybe it just needs something to respond to it, even if it's fake. Jarnox tapped a claw on the console. How many of these did you say humans kept? Pelex didn't answer. He didn't have to. Later that sleep cycle, Jarnox reviewed the compiled Terran footage again. Hundreds of clips, salvaged from the Prospector's Gamble and downloaded from Open Earth archives. Entire subroutines had been built to categorize feline behaviors, the sudden lunges at shadows, the erratic sprinting across rooms at 2 in the morning, the apparent obsession with occupying boxes regardless of size. He watched one video 4 times, a feline jumping onto a warm laptop keyboard while its human tried to work. The human laughed, moved the cat, and seconds later it returned this time, flopping sideways across the keys. Sabotage, Jarnox muttered. He tapped his calm, Isin, do you feel up to walking? The human's voice came back, hoarse but level. I'm not dead yet. Meet me in Corridor 3. Observation Junction. 10 minutes later, Isin arrived, his left arm in a rigid support shell and his gait stiff. He looked thinner, paler, but his eyes were clear. You're going to ask me why we kept them around, he said, leaning against the wall. No, Jarnox replied. I want to know why you let them take over. Isin chuckled once. They didn't take over. We gave in. That is not reassuring. Isin tilted his head toward the observation glass. The feline, still curled against the drone, now had one paw thrown over it in a loose grip. You ever been cooped up for months on end with the same 5 people eating rehydrated protein bricks and breathing recycled air? Isin asked. No, that thing shows up in your lap. Warm, soft, purring like a miniature engine. You start thinking maybe the universe isn't trying to kill you today. Just for a second. Jarnox tapped the glass. It nearly got your entire crew killed. It also kept Mara from walking out the airlock 3 weeks before we found the artifact that funded the entire expedition. Pelex floated into view from the junction. We have a development. The feline's memory patterns are unlike anything we've seen. Not only does it recognize individual crew members, but it also seems to recall specific environmental cues: door chimes, clothing textures, even the frequency of laughter. Isin nodded slowly. Yeah, it picks favorites. Jarnox narrowed his eyes. Meaning, my bunkmate, Harlan, once stepped on its tail by accident. After that, every time he walked past, it'd knock his water container off the table. Pelex blinked all 3 eyes. Intentional retaliation? Absolutely. Jarnox stared through the glass again. It's aware of slights, and it holds grudges, Isin said, scratching his beard. But if it likes you, you're golden. It'll sleep on your chest, bring you dead bugs. Sometimes it even washes your hair. Pelex looked horrified. It grooms you. Only if you're lucky, Isin said. Or cursed. Depends on the day. Jarnox gestured toward the containment chamber. We need to test its limits. Controlled exposure scenarios. I want to know how long it takes to override rational decision-making in various species. Pelex hesitated. You want volunteers? Jarnox turned, expression unreadable. No, I want skeptics. By the next rotation, a test chamber had been constructed 3 decks below the main lab. It was shielded, monitored, and lined with redundant containment protocols. 3 subjects were selected: a Krennic diplomat with a documented resistance to emotional manipulation, a Grolian engineer with a naturally low empathy index, and a Talari archivist whose species lacked mammalian contact entirely. Each subject was exposed to the feline for 10 minutes, monitored for physiological and behavioral changes, then debriefed separately. The Krennic, after 5 minutes, attempted to coax the feline onto his lap and requested a blanket. The Grolian, initially disinterested, began humming a lullaby from his homeworld while stroking its back. The Talari, despite lacking an understanding of touch-based bonding, offered to sacrifice a portion of personal ration storage for continued observation sessions. Jarnox reviewed the footage in silence. Pellex floated beside him, visibly unsettled. It's not just influence. It's adaptation. It modifies its approach based on species. It's building rapport, Jarnox said. As if it knows what each subject needs. Isin entered without knocking. That's why they survived Earth. Everything else either ran or tried to kill them. Cats learned to get under our skin. Jarnox didn't look up. We're not even sure it's sapient. Isin leaned against the wall. Does it matter? The feline, now relocated to the test chamber, leapt onto the observation bench and began chasing its tail in a tight circle. The Grolian engineer watching from behind the glass laughed so hard he fell off his seat. Pellex exhaled slowly. We can't keep it on the ship. Jarnox nodded. No. But releasing it would be worse. We could transmit a warning, Pellex suggested. Alert other vessels. Quarantine protocols. Jarnox turned to Isin. How did your people prevent these things from spreading uncontrollably? Isin shrugged. Didn't. We just pretended we were in charge. Jarnox folded his arms. That won't work for us. The feline leapt into the air, flipped mid-jump, and landed on its feet before curling into a loaf shape. Isin tilted his head. You know, it hasn't even used half its tricks yet. Pellex looked alarmed. There are more. Oh yeah, Isin said. Wait until it finds a sunbeam. The feline was missing. Jarnox stood in the center of the observation deck, arms rigid at his sides, staring at the empty cushion in the containment chamber. The drone hovered aimlessly, its tactile appendage twitching like a confused limb, unable to locate its charge. I reviewed the logs 3 times, Pellex said from behind a secondary console, his usually smooth voice strained. There was no breach, no power dip, no mechanical failure. It just isn't there anymore. Jarnox didn't blink. It didn't escape. It was let out. They both turned as the lift doors hissed open and Isin walked in, slower than usual. His support shell had been removed 2 days prior, and his left arm now rested in a soft brace, held close to his chest. He looked less pale, but his steps were measured, as though gauging whether he belonged in the room at all. I heard, he said. You were the last person authorized near the chamber, Jarnox replied. I didn't open anything. Jarnox stepped toward him. Then explain how a creature incapable of operating digital interfaces managed to deactivate 3 layers of isolation and vanish without triggering a single sensor. I don't know, Isin said. But if I did, I'd tell you. Pellex floated between them, his eyes darting from one to the other. We should sweep the ventilation system. And the galley. If it's hungry again. It's not in the galley, Isin interrupted. It's smarter than that. It knows you're looking for it. That implies advanced strategic thought, Jarnox said. It's been planning this, Isin said, rubbing his temple. Every time you thought it was napping, it was observing. Testing. We are not losing to a terrestrial lab creature, Jarnox said. Track every heat signature on this deck. Filter for anything under 15 kilograms. Pellex activated the scan. Beginning sweep. Filtering out crew and drone signatures. A soft chime sounded. Pellex frowned. Odd. There's a spike in the hydroponics bay. Jarnox turned on his heel. Let's go. The hydroponics bay was humid, the air thick with the scent of nutrient-rich moss and filtered algae. Rows of plants from over 20 ecosystems lined the walls, their leaves trembling slightly in the artificial breeze. The feline was perched atop the central control console, tail curled neatly around its legs, watching a butterfly-shaped pollinator drone flutter past. Upon seeing the trio enter, it stretched luxuriously, back-arched, paws extended, then leapt down without a sound and vanished into the foliage. Jarnox lunged after it, stepping directly into a patch of fungus that released a spore cloud into his face. He staggered back, coughing, his mandibles twitching involuntarily. Isin ducked under a thick vine and followed the rustling sound, weaving through the flora with a practiced gait. Don't chase it. You won't catch it. Jarnox wiped his optics. We don't need to catch it. We need to understand how it got out. It's not about doors or locks, Isin said, slowing. It's about timing. It waits until you're distracted. Then it moves. Pelex hovered above the ferns. There. Third row moving left. The feline darted from the underbrush and climbed halfway up a vertical trunk before leaping sideways into an empty nutrient tray. It sat, tail twitching. Jarnox approached more carefully this time, lowering himself to a crouch. It's not trying to flee. It's exploring. Selecting. Selecting what? Pelex asked. Isin exhaled. Its next perch. It always wants the highest point it can reach. Not for safety, for dominance. Jarnox tapped a command into his wrist console, and 2 drones entered the bay, gliding silently. We'll box it in. Before the drones could bracket the feline, it ducked under a growth lamp, darted between the bay stems of the Varelian reeds, and disappeared again. Pelex's console beeped. We lost visual. Jarnox stood. Seal the exits. Already done. Minutes passed. They combed the bay row by row, but the creature had vanished again. Jarnox examined the console where it had been sitting. A faint smudge of fur. 1 claw mark on the edge. Nothing else. Nothing's chewed, Isin said, inspecting the wiring. That's how you know it's not panicking. It's not trying to escape. It's nesting. Pelex blinked. In hydroponics? Isin gestured broadly. Warm lights. Quiet. No foot traffic. If I were a cat, I'd live here. Jarnox turned to Pelex. Keep scanning. Use scent particles if you have to. Isin sat on a crate and winced as his shoulder twitched. Jarnox noticed. You're still healing. Yeah. 1 nerve bundle's still irritated. They want to do a cold seal regrowth if it doesn't stabilize. Terran medicine is more invasive than I expected, Pelex said. It works, Isin replied. Eventually. Jarnox studied him. You still want the creature back? I want it safe, Isin said. And I want you to stop acting like it's a threat to civilization. It is, Jarnox said. Just not in the way we feared. Pelex's scanner pinged again. There's movement in the irrigation ducts. West side. Slow, deliberate. They followed the signal to a maintenance panel behind the kelp tanks. Jarnox removed the cover, revealing a narrow tunnel lined with condensation and rooted wires. 10 seconds later, 2 eyes peered from the darkness. The feline emerged slowly, 1 paw at a time, blinking up at them. It was carrying something in its mouth. Jarnox squinted. Is that a vine pod? Isin leaned closer. It's offering it to you. The feline set the pod down gently and sat beside it, curling its tail around it like a prize. Pelex floated back slightly. A gift. Isin nodded. It doesn't understand we're upset. It thinks this will make it better. Jarnox stared at the pod, then at the feline. It believes in reciprocity. I told you, Isin said. It doesn't operate like most animals. It doesn't want freedom. It wants assurance. Jarnox picked up the pod. It was intact, undamaged. A perfect specimen. The feline stood and rubbed against his boot. Pelex nearly dropped his scanner. It trusts you now. I don't want its trust, Jarnox said. You have it anyway, Isin replied. Good luck giving it back. They returned the feline to the containment chamber, this time altering the walls to simulate a hydroponic environment. Warm lights, soft surfaces, and a modified drone programmed to mimic plant movement. The feline settled in immediately, purring as it batted at a dangling leaf simulator. Jarnox watched from the observation window. It needs interaction, he said, but not stimulation. Familiarity. Comfort. Pelex adjusted the environmental controls. We can simulate a Terran lap. Pressure, warmth, heartbeat pattern. Isin stood at the threshold, his arm aching again, though he didn't mention it this time. You could leave it on Earth, he said. They know how to care for them. Jarnox shook his head. And risk it stowing away again? No. It stays here. Understudy. But not as a specimen. Pelex looked up. Then what is it? Jarnox exhaled. A consultant. The feline rolled onto its back and blinked at them upside down. No one spoke for a while. Then Isin chuckled. You're going to end up naming it. Jarnox didn't respond. But an hour later, when he keyed in the new designation for the containment suite, he entered one word. Advisor.